So in 1982, the Israelis invaded Lebanon, one of their numerous adventures there. Extremely destructive, lots of civilians getting killed. The Israelis fight war in a way that is extremely brutal and merciless towards civilians.
So the propaganda that I've always received, because, being on the right,
yes,
there was a time when I would watch the standard right-wing thinkers. I won't name them, but you know who I'm talking about.
yes.
What do they keep? They keep talking about Judeo-Christian values all the time. And the message that I received for well over a decade was that Israel is extremely precise, pinpoint precision, all that kind of stuff. I'm starting to find that less credible.
I know for a fact
Yeah.
that they bombed a UN compound in South Lebanon, targeting the genuine war refugees hiding in a UN center. And that was back in 1996, I think it was. It wasn't the 93 war, I think it was the 96 war. So
I'm
know
less
for a
inclined to
fact
believe
that's
that
not true.
these days.
I know for a fact that the Israelis don't have the propagandized concern for civilians that is often repeated. I also know for a fact that organizations like Hamas do hide in civilian areas.
Yes.
And one of the newspapers that is allied with Hamas admitted that in one hospital that the Israelis raided and attacked, Hamas leaders had been there and were in the hospital. So there is this, the worst thing about this conflict is that both sides are largely correct about the other.
Yes.
That's the horrendous reality. The Palestinians do view their lives extremely cheaply,
Yes.
especially the Hamas leadership. They do hide in civilian areas, and they do want civilian casualties, and they use them as propaganda.
Yes.
And the Israelis do target civilians, and they do try to increase the levels of collateral damage sometimes, with the objective of breaking the Palestinian population. And they're, in a way, perfect enemies that feed into each other. The midwit take is to choose a side.
Yes.
In reality...
Well, I choose a side, Britain.
That's not a side in this conflict anymore. But in reality, there is a level of horribleness about both sides that we need to confront. For example, Thomas Friedman, who is by no means anti-Israel, writes in his book that when the Palestinian First Intifada kicked off in 87, I believe it was, and Palestinians began peaceful protests, his Israeli government connections were telling him, really, we can't wait for them to resume terrorism because that's the only way that we can deal with each other, violence. So when the Palestinians decided that we're going to adopt, for a period of time, and after engaging in terrorism for a long time, peaceful means of protest, the Israelis didn't like that.
Yes.
And it was the Israeli policy to go and find the Palestinian protesters and beat them until their bones were broken, even though these were peaceful protesters. The policy was break their bones.
Well as funding whatever groups they could find that were
as well as funding various, or tolerating various Israeli right-wing groups, settler groups, who would go around and provoke the Palestinians and fight them. And this in no way absolves the Palestinians of what they do.
Yes.
Which does involve militants hiding between civilians, which does involve the use of schools and mosques and hospitals in order to hide their weapons and their equipment. They don't actually fire from hospitals, that would be absurd, but they do personally hide there. And then you end up with this perfect mix of two uncompromising, merciless enemies having no regard for civilian life.
Yes.
and fighting in the most dishonorable way imaginable.
Is there any form of winning for Hamas or Israel that is not the annihilation of the other?
Not really. I mean, remember, the Israelis had a plan to expel the Palestinians from the territories that they would control before the 1948 war broke out. So they'd already planned mass expulsions. And they were aided by Arabs saying, well, maybe you want to move out of the way as civilians because we're advancing or we're attacking or whatever. The worst thing about this war is that a lot of what the two sides say about each other is true.
Yes. I've also always found the idea of the two-state solution completely absurd.
It's the Holy Land is the West Bank and
Yes.
Jerusalem. Neither side can give
I
that
can
up.
only ever see the one-state or more likely the three-state solution working. If Egypt owned Gaza, then the Egyptians could police it, and if Jordan owned the West Bank, then or whatever part of it, then they could police it, and then Israel could have a sensible conversation with those two governments.
Yes and no. This is how we got the 67 war, firstly. Secondly, between the Arab governments, when they start competing with each other, because they all do, and they all have ambitions against each other.
Yes.
So the royal family of Jordan had ambitions for Syria and still has ambitions for the part of Saudi Arabia that they come from, which is incidentally Mecca itself. The nature of the competition is always going to be who can go further to the right. And that means who can restore Arab and Muslim honor and get rid of these pesky Jews. That's always going to be part of what animates Arab governments. And that's why they can't all make peace. Because how do you distinguish your brand? How do you distinguish yourself? How do you say that you're offering something different? You have to be a holdout. This is what the job of the Syrians was until the Assad family was overthrown. So even for the rest of the Arabs, there's a big problem with Israel. And they're never going to be able to look at their ethnic and religious kin in Israel, Palestine, whatever you want to call it, being daily humiliated by the Israelis. And on a religious dimension, for Islam, it can never accept a Jewish state.
Yes.
So even if the Israelis started tomorrow morning behaving like angels, the fact that they are Jews in control of the Holy Land is going to be a problem for a chunk of Muslims.
Yes.
Whatever that percentage is, we can debate that.
What I don't get, though, is, and there must be a reason, a geopolitical reason for, the pieces laid out on the board there. Why does Israel have such a hold on the US? Why is it so crucial for the US that Israel is strong and supported to such a considerable extent?
So we know from Jeffrey Epstein that there are espionage networks and blackmail networks that are connected to Israeli intelligence that are in operation. Let's get that out of the way.
Yeah.
We also know from Thomas Massey, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, that pretty much every congressman has an AIPAC guy.
Apart from him. And his wife died in mysterious circumstances recently.
There you go.
And Trump has been trying to push him out and get him primaried.
There you go.
Interesting.
So we know these things.
Yes.
We know these things. And we cannot pretend not to know them. That's quite important. We have to acknowledge them. Having said that, strategically there is a logic still. The logic is that Israel acts as a springboard for other American influence in the Muslim world. And that the current configuration of the Middle East means that there isn't a great Muslim state compatible to the Ottoman Empire that can emerge and consolidate over the resources and populations that exist in the Middle East and become a challenger to the West. So Israel has a geopolitical function.
Like if it wasn't for Israel being where it was, Egypt and Turkey would expand and
Egypt
one of
and
them would
Turkey
become
naturally.
a proper regional power.
So if you look at the history of the Levant, of
Yes.
the area that Israel is in, it's all about the endless warfare between Persia, Anatolia, and the state on the Nile. That's always been the flow of history.
Okay.
Different peoples, different empires have come and gone, and they've all done the same thing, which is fight where I'm from.
So we've got three cogs: Turkey, Iran, and Egypt.
And Egypt.
And the point of Israel is to basically be a stone in the mechanism that stops those cogs from turning.
More or less. More or less. That's the fundamental geopolitical role of Israel.
And that is worth it, is it? Because it's quite troublesome supporting Israel. I mean, it comes at a high cost.
I know that this is the policy. The alternative could include a recreated Ottoman Empire, which is what the Muslim Brotherhood was created to advocate for. And in a real sense, the Muslim Brotherhood has been one of the most successful political organizations in history. Not because it has already seized power. In the places where it's already seized power, it was a mess. But in Turkey, where it did seize power, it's done an outstanding job. I mean, Erdogan did transform Turkish industry and did make Turkey into a serious geopolitical player again, as the Ottomans were.
He screwed up with the money supply, but yes.
But even with the money supply, the idea that you and I know more about monetary policy than Erdogan is rash. And therefore, let's assume that he knows what he's doing. That's always fun. When you want to think about politics and a policy that looks absolutely stupid, make the assumption, what if he's smarter than you? If he is smarter than you, you would expect that one of the results of his policy would be a major increase in manufacturing and a huge increase in the amount of exports and a big flow of investment into the manufacturing sector in Turkey. That's exactly what's happened.
I mean, I have gone through most of my career betting on the UK government being stupider than I could possibly imagine. And every time it's come up rather well for me.
Yes.
So it's not impossible that foreign leaders make mistakes, but yes.
Consider the possibility that they're not stupid.
What, British leaders?
Yes.
No, I can't do that. That's
Consider
ridiculous.
the possibility that they're malicious.
Oh, okay. Right.
The idea
to what end?
To climb up this greasy pole of politics requires a degree of skill and sophistication and a degree of intelligence that isn't just verbal intelligence. There are all kinds of special interests that you have to take care of. There are all kinds of personalities and money that you have to watch out for. There are all kinds of nasty people who are in the shadows trying to entice you into following this policy or that policy. To rise to the top, you need to be able to play a game with those people in order to rise. These are extremely smart people. You can only play this game if you're smart yourself.
If you would like to see the full version of this premium video, please head over to lotuseaters.com and subscribe to gain full access to all of our premium content.